A lot of companies who have remote workers are what's called a hybrid team. They've got people working in the main office, maybe working from home, a co-working space, or they have a satellite office where some people work together who are part of that same company. So how can your company still have deep collaboration when not everyone's on the same level playing field when it comes to proximity? Well, Webflow is one of these companies and they are thriving. Today on Building Remote Teams, we'll talk to Leonard Souza, their group engineering manager, about how they're making it work so well. Stay tuned. As you know, Building Remote Teams is a brand new podcast. And to celebrate our launch, we have some really awesome discounts to give you from some of our favorite tools for remote teams. We have discount tools for 1Password, Donut, Hey Taco, Carrot, BirthdayBot, KarmaBot, and a ton more. All you need to do is to go to buildingremoteteams.com and subscribe with your email. You'll get a link to the page with all of the recommended tools and discounts that I mentioned above. Now, on to the show. Hey everyone, welcome to Building Remote Teams. I'm here with Leonard Souza from Webflow. How are you doing, Leonard?
Good. 'Tis I, Leonard Souza.
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. No, I appreciate being here.
So, Mr. Leonard, you work for Webflow. Tell me a little bit about, well, let's get there first. Okay, one sec. So you work from home, is that right?
I do.
Okay. Tell me about kind of the space that you're in right now. What do you see when you look around?
Well, I have a standing desk, which I like, and I have a pair of studio monitors because I love music, and a really nice little subwoofer, and I have the whole audio interface system that it's really important to my daily workflow. I've got a 5K monitor and hooked up to a MacBook Pro, and I've got a pretty nice piece of fine art behind my screens that I get to stare at from time to time. And I look to my right and I see a 3D printer that I've neglected to use as much as I planned to. I'm actually going to be using that pretty soon. And,
it's very inspirational. Yeah.
I also have a gym in my office, which I think is pretty uncommon because most people bring it up as a thing. They're like, "Hey, there's a gym in your office." And I go, "Yeah, I don't like gyms, like public gyms. I like private spaces." So
sure.
Pretty much a den to do all things Leonard is what this room is.
Do you ever wear a shirt and tie when you're on a call and you've got like your gym behind you?
No, I rarely wear shirts just in general. So, no, I haven't worn a tie, I think in, 10 years.
Cool. Great. Well, I just love to hear about, where people work and kind of their environments.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me a little bit about Webflow and what your role is there.
Yeah. So Webflow is a SaaS product. It started up in about 2012 and been around for a little bit, maybe 2013. And it is a product that aims to democratize the creation of software. So for people who don't want to learn how to code, who are very creative, like designers and such, Webflow sort of gives them the tools to build, software, pretty great complicated websites that, that would require the help of many developers to help them with, and sort of Webflow sort of facilitates that whole thing. I've been at Webflow for, I think, about 2.5 years now, and I am the group engineering manager. I oversee pretty much the entire engineering department. We have a relatively flat sort of hierarchy. We have a hierarchy, but we try to keep it as flat as possible. So I report directly to the CEO, whose name is Vlad Magdalene, who's an awesome dude. And we have a team of about 40 engineers right now, and that's a mixture of back-end and front-end engineers. And the team's growing, so we'll have a lot more than that pretty soon. And it's a great place to work, and I'm just grateful to be able to participate in the whole thing.
Wow, awesome. And do these 40 engineers all report to you just because you said flat hierarchy? So like how much is hierarchy? Is that?
They used to have a team of 30, but then that became pretty clear that was unsustainable. So I brought on more engineering managers who we have a hybrid approach to our engineering manager role, which you get up to 5 reports, and then you continue to sort of participate on the teams that your reports are on in the sprint planning process, but you are assigned more like non-blocking tasks. So our engineering managers still code. We are fleshing out a role for a full-time engineering manager. Don't have any of them yet because a lot of our EMs prefer to code still. So so we've got a team of about 5 engineering managers right now.
Okay, got it. So this podcast is called Building Remote Teams. I'm having you on the podcast because you have a bit of a unique setup, and Webflow is a hybrid team. Some people work in an office all together, and some work from home with gyms in the background. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah.
So how does that, like, what's the percentage of who's together and who's remote? And I really just want to get into, like, how does that work?
Yeah. So I've definitely been at companies where this hasn't worked, and Webflow is not one of them. Webflow does a very good job of it, and I think there's a few key ingredients to that recipe. So just to answer the base questions, I think about 70% of our team is remote, or it's approaching 70% of our team. I think Webflow is nearing 100, or is right around the 100 mark right now. So that's about 70 remote employees, and yeah. So we have an office in San Francisco where the other remaining employees are. Some people do enjoy going into an office, and so we have that option. The only office we really have right now is the Bay Area. We do have a couple different cities with like 3 or 4 individuals there, and we may, they do get together and work from time to time, but we consider our headquarters in San Francisco. But I think the key ingredient that I was talking about earlier is, even though we have an office or a physical location, we really pitch this idea of having a remote first culture, meaning that when we're establishing processes, or is it processes, and we're trying to lay down different systems, like how we do conference calls, how we do various things, we think about it from a remote perspective, right? I'll give you an example of a recent change we just made that really helped the remote team. And so every week we have something called an all hands meeting. It's pretty common. So that, the entire team gets together, the entire company gets together to hop on a call, and Vlad talks about various things, and other leaders talk about various things. And before, it used to be very office centric. And what I mean by that is, like, there would be like a group of people gathered around a single like camera and microphone in the office that would stream to everyone else over Zoom, right? And there was while it was really great for the office, there was an odd disconnect from the remote workers and the participation level in the office itself. Because when you're in person, obviously, like, if there's clapping, or if there's things that happen, like if someone makes a joke and there's a bunch of laughing, that kind of really removes the remote workers, because it blows out the microphone, for one, right? People are laughing or clapping, and the people on the call don't know how to participate in that same energy.
Right. It's weird to kind of clap at home, by yourself, maybe.
Yeah. It is kind of weird. Well, I mean, I do it, but I'm also odd. Anyway, mm-hmm. so we ended up asking the office to say, can you just call into the Zoom call just like as if you were a remote employee, even though it's from your desk, just so everyone feels the same. And that changed everything. Like, it was like, it really created this great communal feeling of all hands. For one, we could actually hear everyone, because that single microphone never picked up everyone's voice properly. And then everyone suddenly had their own mic, right? Because they're at their own machine. And okay,
so you'll have everybody in the office at their own machine. So you have like an extra 8 people or whatever it is from Zoom on their own desk.
Yeah, exactly. And not the funny thing, it kind of inverts the feeling though too, because now those people feel a little odd because they're in the office on their own machines, and like they're used to participating with each other. So we're still figuring out how to make that a little bit more accessible for them, and like just trying to make it like, because now clapping is kind of weird because not everyone has their mic turned on, and so when someone says a joke, even though people are laughing, they don't hear a response. So it's kind of like, did I say something wrong? But it's okay. We make light of it. It's still fun and funny. It's not a showstopper. But I will say though that the remote team has reported that it is a much, much better experience for them. So that's just like one thing that we do. Like, that's a remote first idea. So as long as you like sort of lead with that as like a lens through which to approach solving these remote problems, it's very helpful. And I've definitely been in companies where that hasn't been the case. And the second remote workers start to feel neglected, meaning that they don't feel included or that they don't feel considered, it's really rough. It's really rough on them. So.
For sure. How did that change come about? Like, do you have some internal process to like come up with ideas, or was it the CEO that felt it, right? Because sometimes it's weird for remote people, or I guess just people in general who are maybe have these ideas to kind of push them up to say, hey, like, could all of you people, all 8 of you, for my benefit, just sit at your desks now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Webflow has like a very like sort of well stated feedback policy where we're constantly looking for feedback, and we wanted to come from anyone in the company. So I just wanted to sort of put that out there. Like Webflow is all about that. Where this particular bit of feedback came from, though, happened to be, I think it came from me, but it was because I was listening to a lot of people. And what actually was the straw that sort of broke the camel's back that led me to finally just really saying, like, can we please try this, is, I was watching another video cast for, like, it was on engineering managers, and there were, I think it was Pivotal, had done the same thing recently, and they said it changed everything. And I was like, wow, that's a really great sort of tidbit that I can take to Vlad and say, hey, look, this other company did this and they saw great success with it. I'd also been sort of, over the past 6 to 8 months, I had been telling him how difficult it was to hear and various things. And so it kind of just got to like a culmination point where it was like, maybe let's try this. And really it just came down to, it worked. So
nice. For hybrid teams, sometimes, we kind of alluded to it, but remote workers can feel like second-class citizens because they're not in the office, and for whatever reason. So what are some other areas or ways that Webflow has really made this work? You said they've done it really well, and you've seen other companies that really don't do it well. Are there other ways apart from, everyone on the Zoom meeting for their all hands?
Well, I think that, so our three primary communication sort of mediums are Zoom for, this kind of stuff, teleconferencing and just getting together for meetings. Slack is a major network for us. Like everyone's on Slack, and it's very active. We have a lot of different channels. In fact, it's probably a little too active. So we let people know that it's totally cool for them to like log out, and so they're not distracted when they're doing their work. And then also GitHub. So GitHub is a very active sort of community center for us. And
that's for like your project management. Is that what you mean?
That's for the code and project management right now.
Uh-huh.
So we use GitHub projects and we use GitHub just for committing code. And, so we basically think in those terms, like for real-time communication or mostly real-time, Slack is great. It doesn't have to be exactly real-time. But the funny thing is we actually don't even really use email anymore. I don't even know I can't even remember the last time like a report sent me an email or whatever. Everything just takes place through Slack. And I think that when we constantly think about, well, for one, we try and limit the number of communication channels we have, right? Like we don't want to spin up some other network like Spectrum or something and say, and like sort of bifurcate or make it difficult to figure out who's talking about what and where. So we really try and tighten down and create context for certain kinds of discussions. So technical discussions happen on GitHub. Some technical discussions happen on Slack, but it's mostly social and things like that. And then Zoom is more for the real-time collaboration kind of stuff. And that's been really helpful. Just keeping those three things simple and thinking about them first, and also asking this. I think this is the actual answer to your question. Is in the office, we ask that even if you're in the office, that you continue to use those mediums, right? So use Slack while you're in the office. So even though there might be someone sitting next to you, try and use the chat client, because for one, it ports it through a place where other people can potentially see it, and two, a lot of that, like there's communication that happens in office, which is great, like serendipitous chats and things like that kind of get lost that other people don't get access to. So we try and just port everything through a medium that is capable of sharing public kind of, ideas and whatnot. So yeah, it's really just asking everyone to behave as if they were a remote employee, even if they're in the office.
You're at a place with the company where if 70% of the people are remote, then I think it's really obvious how people will not be included. I do wonder for companies where there's like a minority of the number, especially, the first person or up to like, say 20 or 30% of the people are remote, how it's going to be even harder to have that discipline to do that.
Yeah. So
that's all I have to say.
That's great. That's a good statement. It's very true statement. Well, I think a couple things need to take place. And I can kind of describe like how it works and when it doesn't work. It's
Tell us about some of your experience with previous companies where it hasn't worked too.
The main thing that has to be in place in order for it to work is that it has to be a top-down initiative. It has to be. Your leadership in the company has to be pro-remote, and if that doesn't happen, there's a very high probability that that the remote employees will feel alienated. So I worked at another company, like this is like 10 years ago. I've been working remotely, by the way, for about 15 years now. I think that's right. I could be quoting an off number. Maybe it's 12 to 15 years. I can't really remember. It's been a while. And I was working at this company, and I think I was the only remote employee there. They made an exception for me. And well, it wasn't. I was very comfortable. So I already knew how to navigate that, right? And I enjoy navigating those kinds of like challenges. I also like, since I knew that I could easily get lost in the weeds or whatever, that I over communicated and did things that like the entire company would see that helped sort of highlight me, right? And that was just because I was used to that sort of type of interaction. But I won't say that they gave me any tools to do it. I had to go seek it myself. Now, I recommended a friend join that company, and he had a very different experience because he was not used to working remote. And I think that he still has PTSD to this day about his experience there because he just never got recognition for his work. No one ever reached out to him. Everyone second guessed him. They never thought that he was actually doing work, and he was like working his butt off, right? It was really bad. And because the people from the top sort of just made another exception, but didn't actually put the systems into place to surface the contributions this person was making, right? And, so I'd say that if you have a few employees that are doing this, I know it sounds kind of nuts, or wild, but you're going to have to like get that remote first attitude in there, even if it's like a super tiny minority of your employees, because they will feel disconnected pretty quickly. And that means like adopting tools that are remote friendly, like Slack, right? That means replicating certain community events or trying to, what I mean by that is like, so like the office in San Francisco does do things that only the office could do, like Taco Tuesday and things like that. But we also have like analogs, like All Hands, for instance, is an important analog that gets the entire company together. We also have retreats, a yearly retreat that gets the entire company together. We also have quarterly visits. So every remote employee is invited to come to the office every quarter. It's not mandatory by whatsoever. It's actually a very optional thing, but it's encouraged because we want people to come out and feel connected and get that in-person sort of experience on occasion, just so they can actually. I'd like to highlight something about the frequency and cadence of like how often people should be together in person versus like being remote. And I'll tell you what I think is the formula there. For someone who's worked remote a long time. Actually, this doesn't even apply to that. There's one, you have to get your team together at least once a year. That's it. That's really what it comes down to.
But it costs a lot of money.
It does cost a lot of money. But if you only have 3 remote employees, it's not going to cost that much money.
Well, that's true. But for your company, you got 70 people. It's a lot of money.
It is, but you can find creative ways of making it work. So in the past, we'd Airbnb a very large house like in San Diego and have people, pitch in, like drive down there and sort of like try and make it a little bit more cost effective. And granted, yes, we're in a very privileged position at this moment because we do have the means to spend money on this kind of stuff. But I will say it's worth your money. It's worth it. And I'll tell you why. When you get people together, and it only requires one retreat. When you get people together who have never been together in person before, you give them the opportunity to analyze and encode the idiosyncrasies of their teammates so that they can apply and map them to the online persona or online interactions they will have with those teammates in the future. So I'll tell you, this has happened numerous times where you'll have...
Whoa, what does it even mean though? What does it mean?
It means that if you have two people that normally butted heads, right? It's because they're making assumptions because they don't know how to interpret the way that their online personas. Generally, people who aren't used to chatting online don't include an emoji here and there, and they come across a little bit dry, or they just don't really come across as like themselves. And that takes time to develop, like sort of the online persona and how to communicate certain feelings. But the thing is, though, is regardless of that, if you get those two people together into a room, and you have them do something relatively enjoyable together and like some ice-breaking stuff, they're going to learn about each other's personalities. And what happens is the next time they chat online, they could have the same exact dryness as before, but now they have a mental model of that person, and they apply that mental model to that new language, to the language that they're seeing, and it changes how they interact with each other. And it's absolutely critical. It's absolutely critical, especially if they're like, direct teammates. And all it takes, the beauty of it, all it takes is once a year. It does not take more than that. So that 1 yearly retreat is really important and it's worth the money. And we've definitely, blown the budget on that, but we've never regretted it. So I will say that. But, get creative about trying to figure out ways to make it less expensive for you. This year we're having our retreat in Cancun. It's actually in Mayacoba, which is south of Cancun, I think. And, it just made more sense since we have like 100 people. We found a resort to rent out. And that was actually less expensive than like doing rooms individually or whatever. And it does take a lot of time. There's a lot of legwork that's required to sort of, figure out ticket costs, lodging costs, food costs, but you can make it work. There's ways of getting clever with it.
So when they get together, are people just intuitively doing this of being able to understand these other people's personalities and as you say, remapping it to their online experience? Because or do you do lots of thinking about your own life? You got a very thorough user guide about your life, and you do lots of introspection. Does everyone have to sit back and do that? Like, oh, my conversation with Bruce, he's usually this like weirdo online, but like when I saw him in person, he's super cool. Like, and then he goes back online and all of a sudden he remembers he's super cool. Like, do people do that? Or do you have exercises that do that? I'm just trying to put myself in situations to think, do I even think about that? I'm not sure when I get together with people.
Yeah, I think there's two parts to that. So to answer your first question, I do think people naturally do that, right? I think like we're visual creatures. We're really good at analyzing, body language, and we're really good at remembering that kind of stuff, like faces and how people just interact in that sort of way, right? And then that pretty much is easily remembered and mapped to the online persona. And that the other part of your question is like, do we provide an opportunity or sort of a foundational set of, do we create like an ice-breaking sort of thing that allows them to get there quicker? To get to that sort of establishing that relationship quicker. And we do. So when you do your retreat, make sure you have some stuff planned. The way we've done it, and it's evolved over time, but when we had our smaller offsite in San Diego, when we were around 25 people, it was super freeform, like really, really open and just whatever. But it was cool though. I actually quite like that. There wasn't like many, here's the vision of the company talks and here's some work, quote unquote, work we're going to be doing while we're on the retreat. It was more like, hey, there's a pool table, there's a bunch of board games. We just, the one rule is try and get to know people. That was pretty much like it, right? And that was nice, especially for 25 people. Like it worked out pretty well because it's not like a huge group. Like we went hiking with each other and, we just had normal everyday conversations like, hey, Bob, what's your deal? Like, you just find out about people's personal stories, and that was useful. That being said, as the company's grown, so has that approach. And now we have a little bit more structure, a lot more structure, but we do leave a lot of room for serendipity and so sort of social experiences. So last year we had our retreat in Lisbon, Portugal, and the days were structured like from like 8 or 9 in the morning till about 2 p.m. in the afternoon. It was, we were together. We were going through like workshopy kind of stuff. Vlad would give a talk. Bryant, another co-founder, would give a talk, or Sergi would give a talk. And then we had like interactive exercises where we do, like stuff where we'd come up with ideas and break everyone up into teams, and they'd, work together and you'd work with people you didn't necessarily know. We do a lot of cross collaboration, cross team collaboration kind of stuff so that people can get to know other people in the company. And that worked because we were around 50 people then. And then in the evenings were reserved for fun time, right? So we had activities set up. For instance, there was like this really cool natural water park there, and you could choose to go to that, or you could choose to go get surfing lessons. No, that was in Cancun. You could choose to go to like this other cenote or whatever. It's like a hole in the ground kind of waterfall-y thing.
Oh, I'm glad you had the waterfall-y thing, because hole in the ground.
There was water in the hole is what I was trying to get to. It's actually kind of cool.
Water in a hole. That sounds great.
Good. It's a super fun time. Like, what else do you need? And anyway, so we'd break up into groups and then do those fun activities. And then of course there'd be dinners, and we would try and break the dinners up. Like we'd take a manager and be like, hey, can you take those 5 people with you and having a more intimate dinner with each other? So they'd go off, we'd break up in little groups and just give people opportunities to just, wine and dine and have some fun if they're into that kind of thing, or just enjoy some great food. I also had set up an engineering dinner because our engineering team was getting a lot bigger then, and a lot of people didn't really know each other. So we had a big engineering dinner with 35 people, or actually it might have been 30 at that point. And it was just us in a room, and it got super loud, and it was a lot of fun. And I sort of said, when we had traveled to the restaurant, I asked people to break into buddies, and I say, find someone you've never spoken to before or you've spoken to rarely. And I was like, you please sit with them on the bus and get to know them. Like that's the whole point of this thing. And I set that expectation up front. And then I said, now please stay with that person when you sit down to dinner. And then that worked out pretty well. And I even got to know some people I didn't know on the team. And then about halfway through, I said, okay, we're going to play musical chairs. Do the same thing again, but get up and find someone else you don't really know. And then we did that. And it turned out to just be a really great way for everyone to sort of to get to know each other. Right. And so, yeah, I think adding structure, like obviously if you're going to spend the money on a retreat, which is, it's costly, you got to make sure you get the most out of it. And it's not to say that you need to be like super rigid. In fact, we try and leave a lot of room for serendipity and all that fun stuff. But at the same time, like we do have structure there because we want to make sure that we're maximizing our return. So,
yeah, of course, you have certain things that you want to happen, like related to these serendipitous moments of people getting to know each other, so they can learn about the personalities, map them onto their online, interactions. And so, yeah, you're optimizing for that during your experience, which is really great. I mean, I could just see a lot of people sitting at home or it's a co-working space or wherever they're listen to this thing, just saying like, man, I would just love to have that on my team. They're lonely, I'm lonely at home. I'm like me, the person listening, I'm lonely at home, and like I just feel really disconnected or as a second class citizen. So, I mean, listen, it's really inspiring to hear how that, like, just about that retreat, that whole experience. It sounds incredible.
Another thing we do, so we recognize too that everyone doesn't want to work from like a lonely office where it's quiet and isolated. I have to be one of those people. Like I need to work from a lonely office. Otherwise I don't get anything done. But there are certain people that have to be around other people in order to feel productive or to get into a productive mode. And so we offer all of our remote employees a $200 stipend to go to a co-working space so that they can be around people. They may not be around Webflow people, but at least they're around other people potentially in the same industry that they can chat with, And so that's another thing we offer to help remote employees feel like they're part of a community, in addition to the retreat and also the visits. I'm trying to think of what else we do, but those are some of the things that we do to make people feel not alienated, whatever the opposite word is for that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I'm pretty extroverted myself, and I find, I do my deep work at home, right? So I can really just focus. I've got my very comfortable environment set up. But when I've got lighter tasks to do, I go to my co-working space, usually at least 2 times a week, just to have that interaction with other adults, apart from my wife and my 3 children, and I find it's great. Like I make friends there, like we hang out, we do lunch, some of them come over to my house, and it's been super, super helpful. Even while I was working with, another remote company, and they had, there's a whole other set of people there. That sounds great. Let's shift a little bit. You've worked with lots of remote people. I mean, it's been a long time that you've been doing it. What type of personalities work really well remote, and which maybe do not work well remote? Where you could talk to this person, and you're like, this person will not do well remote.
It's interesting. I don't really think it's a simple.
There's hope for everyone.
Yeah, I think there is hope for everyone, but it is a simple question, right? You might ask someone like, do you prefer working in an office or not? And they'd be like, I prefer working in an office. And okay, cool. Well, maybe we can figure out how to relocate you to San Francisco. I think most people tend to, remote work can be very overwhelming when you first, sort of start doing it. And there's definitely sort of a self-awareness you need of to understand like your energy levels and how that plays out throughout the day. Also like a self-discipline thing, just, there's things in the house, you kind of have to learn to carve a space out that says like, when I'm in this room, I'm working. And it kind of allows you to shut off the rest of your house from you, right? But also depends on if you have kids at home, and that can be, if they're loud or whatever, which works fine. We have we're a very pro-family company. And, you just got to make sure you have like a space. I think that's the important thing, is to have like a barrier, right? An access mundi, if you will. But I do think
what? What?
I was getting into some mythology stuff. It's like basically a threshold. Like when you step into a church, right? It's almost like a sanctuary. It changes your mental state because of the space, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you called it an access mundi?
An access mundi. Yeah. If you look into the lore, like Loki and like the god, like the coyote and like the gods of mischief and stuff like that, they tend to represent this liminal space where you cross the threshold and you're no longer in like a safe place. You're kind of like in this place between where you grow. And anyways, that's the access mundi is like sort of a rite of passage Joseph Campbell thing, and we can get into that later. Anyways, I will say though that
I have no idea what that means. Yes, continue. You can have your
there are three. I think there are three ingredients though, just to any good team member, and then it comes down to kind of their personality type and like the kind of mentorship, I guess, the mentorship or leadership they're looking for. But we do look for people that are humble. That's like a really key component to our team members. Humbleness, humility is important. It's just important all around. I think that when you're humble, also in a remote environment, you try to seek to establish relationships and to amplify relationships versus trying to like stand out as an individual. And that's really useful in a remote team, because I think when you bias toward relationship building and communication, that's the word. When you bias towards communication, you're going to be probably 10 times more successful in a remote environment.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that makes sense.
And you look for people that are very hungry just to do interesting things and solve interesting problems. And, that kind of energy really helps drive, remote workers, because they don't need to be encouraged to do something from their boss. Like they're already willing and ready to go. A healthy hungriness is really important. And then, smart people, like you want to make sure that they're clued in and they're sensitive to the interactions around them. Like they tend to like know what's happening in a group situation. They can read certain things, and then they can kind of adapt that to the remote environment, right? And that judgment really helps with like group dynamics and helps them shape their words and actions to be a better remote worker. So, but the thing is though, is that being humble, hungry, and smart apply to office workers too. It's not necessarily it's not like one or the other, right? It's more like these are just good teammate attributes, and you just need to find people that are good at that. Right.
Yeah, I think, as you were speaking, I was wondering, how many of these things are just things that Webflow really appreciates in people of their company, and versus things that are just really important for people who are remote workers. But because it sounds like Webflow, it's such an integral part of Webflow that maybe it's hard to be able to, to pull these two things apart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like I said before, it's like there's a conversation at the beginning generally of any hiring process where are you more interested in working in an office or not? And if they're more interested in working in an office, then you figure out how to make that work. And if not, then it's cool. We'll figure out.
You actually weight it different? Do you weight it differently? Like, they got to come to San Francisco. We're going to spend. Oh, really?
Weighted differently? No. I mean, if they're willing to relocate, and we're definitely willing to help them. We find that most people are pretty on board with the remote thing though, but it's not like, but we can't assume that everyone will be. And yeah, I think that, when I said the thing about communication, you want to find people that are just, great communicators, highly communicative, if that's even a word. That
it is, I think.
That, that just come across very clear and concise and know when to speak up, and they'll figure it out. Right. And, if you provide the right environment for them, where they have all these tools available to them, such as Slack, GitHub, and Zoom, they'll figure it out. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. Trust them.
Do you have to coach people on? Tell me about that. That's a big issue with trust, especially for people that are new to, hiring someone. I help lots of companies, build their products. And so maybe we'll hire a developer that's outside of their city, and they get really anxious about that. And I think in large part is just because they don't trust that they're going to get work done, or that they're actually going to be working. So how do you, it sounds like right off the bat, you're like, trust them. But like, how can you just trust them when you don't have any working relationship with them?
Well, I mean, so you kind of have to, assume good intent, and you vet them, right? So you can kind of like give them the benefit of the doubt to start with, and then you evaluate them on their impact, right? It's not like you say, oh, I trust you, and if they're not getting anything done, you say, well, whatever, that's okay. Like you figure out what's going on. Like you sit down with them.
You're not willfully blind, and you're not just ignoring.
Yeah, you say like, look, we would have expected you to do X. What's blocking you? How can we unblock you? And just be that support system for them, right? So it's less about not trusting them. It's more about providing them all the support they could possibly need to do their absolute best work and to feel like and have a meaningful existence, right? Like the three main intrinsic motivators that we promote here at Webflow to try and really get everyone on that feeling of meaningfulness is autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Those are the three things. And they're from Daniel Pink's book, Drive, which is a fantastic book. So, but remote work lends itself well to this idea of autonomy. Like, hey, you get your work done the way you get your work done. We're not going to step in and ask you to do anything differently. We know everyone's different. You figure it out. You're an adult, you're self-aware, and, we've evaluated you. We think you're humble. We think you're smart. We think you're hungry. That's all we need. Now, here's some work. Figure out how to do it. That's autonomy, right? And then mastery doesn't really play into this whole trust equation that we're talking about before. But I will say that it kind of plays into making sure people feel motivated enough. You don't need to worry about trust issues because they're naturally going to want to work and do great things for you. And so mastery is, we say, if you want to go to, for one, like if they want to buy a book or if they want to do some training or if they want to do anything like that, we basically kind of just buy it for them and say, we'll expense it. We'll totally help you become better at the work that you do. And always try and provide them opportunities to introduce them to people that can push them and all these other fun things. And that really gets people going, right? And then there's the third thing which is purpose, right? And that's a very top-down thing. All of these are top-down, but purpose is what are we trying to do as a group of human beings sitting on this rock, floating through space, sure. Right? And Webflow has a clear intentionality to it. It's like we are here to democratize the creation of software. It's actually a twofold mission. And I think the other half of the mission, I didn't mention the other half of the mission earlier because it wasn't applicable, but it is now because we're talking about what motivates people and instilling trust or arriving at trust with your employees. And that is, we want to build a company where people can lead impactful and meaningful lives. It's equally important to the first mission. And, that's something that's very important to our leadership. And that's also something that allows us to just give out trust, right? Because without trust, people wouldn't have a meaningful feeling from working or whatever. And they can't do impactful work if they're not trusted, if we just trust them. So it's kind of a leap of faith, right? But I will say this, like, don't measure people on like the time they're sitting in a seat. That's a very poor way of evaluating impact. Measure them on what they do and what they produce, right? And if they're producing, like, we have some people that are just, ridiculously productive. And, if they can get their work done in fewer than 40 hours a week, fine. That's like, we trust them that's what they need. And like, they're just super focused and motivated. Then we don't need to ask more than that. There's definitely a threshold where it becomes detrimental to ask them to do more work, right? They'll burn themselves out. Webflow's in it for the long haul. We don't look at our employees like cogs. We look at them as trusted team members that we want to make sure can lead great lives, right? So, and I think part of that is like, if they're getting their work done, they're having the impact that we would expect. Great. If not, then it's not about even admonishing them. It's about, how can we support them? How can we amplify them? Like, where are we going wrong? Where's management making mistakes that is not enabling this person to do their best work? And so, it's kind of like, assume good intent and just make sure you're doing a bang up job of giving your team the tools they need to do their best work. So
I mean, that sounds great. I think there's probably going to be people listening to this and they're just not there yet. Like they've been burned by people, whether working in by employees who've either worked with them in an office or remotely. And they're just like, I have such a hard time trusting people in general, and then, maybe they just have to take baby steps towards, where you guys at, where you guys are just very mature, it seems like, in this whole ability to trust.
Yeah, and the inverse is true too. So, we've definitely hired people and they are suffering from PTSD, and it's no joke. Like, I'll sit down and be like, wow, we have to, like, before I can even evaluate them on their impact, I'm like, let's let you heal a little bit. Because I'll do something, right? And for instance, I might be like, hey, do you have a few minutes to chat? And I never ever say that anymore, by the way. But if I do, a lot of times people think they're getting fired, right? If that's the only thing you say to them,
that's usually how it starts.
And it's because they carry baggage with them, right? They carry these bad negative experiences, and they react in interesting and not always great ways. So the inverse is true too, because of that. Generally, a lack of trust creates those kinds of environments where it's like crack the whip, and if you don't deliver, you're fired, kind of a thing. And we just don't operate like that here. That's not that. We've never found that to be useful or productive. And I can understand, though, modern business doesn't really provide tools to be a trustful type of leader, right? Modern business is all about revenue and making sure that the company can thrive. And those are all very important. We definitely worry about those things and make sure that those are in place as well. But
thriving's okay.
Yeah. But, we rather bias towards servant leadership, right? That's the whole thing, is like, we want to serve our team. And we know that at the end of the day, that will benefit us more so than any sort of dictatorship like approach. So, and it has time and time again.
I love it. Leonard, thanks a lot for coming on the show and sharing with us your vast experience.
Well, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure chatting with you, buddy.
Yeah, right on. Cool. Well, from Leonard and myself, Jevin, thanks for listening, and we will catch you on the flippity flop. Bye, Leonard.
Bye. Thank you.
Hey listeners, we're really trying to get the message out about how remote teams can be so awesome. If you found this podcast helpful, would you take 60 seconds to leave us a review in iTunes? It helps us rank to have more people learn about this show, and it helps us know which content is the most helpful. As a thank you, I'll try to read every review on the show and give you a shout out. Thanks a lot!